All women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children. Men will die for their wives and children, and God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts, the Trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the Quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, and the Transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Feminismus delendus est. Social justice violates natural law. The Fall of Western Civilization, written by Conrad Riker. Available now, links in description. Social justice violates natural law. A field guide for men who still notice reality. The epistemology of the tantrum. How a beige steering wheel cover unmasked the 144 BPM extortion racket, the dual mating strategy, and the female war on the logos. Read her manifesto. Read it again. A grown woman shaking at 144 beats per minute, not because a bomb detonated, not because a tyrant seized her property, but because a man handed her a beige steering wheel cover. We are instructed by the high priests of the modern academy to call this lived experience, an unassailable empirical data point proving the systemic violence of the masculine condition. Let us define our terms with clinical exactness. Harm is objective, measurable tissue damage or material deprivation. Offense is the internal subjective weather system of the observer. To conflate the two is a catastrophic failure of basic reason. A society that equates a plastic car accessory with a visceral act of domestic terrorism has not progressed. It has formally abandoned the logos, the objective, rational order of the universe for the theological tyranny of the tantrum. Beneath the comedic absurdity of polyurethane oppression lies the dark, mechanical reality of female solipsism. The steering wheel cover is not the true target of her wrath. It is a symbol of the masculine logos she despises. It represents utility, provision, and stability, the very virtues that built the roads she drives on, the hospitals that cure her, and the civilization that keeps her safe from the raw, unforgiving state of nature. She calls this stability suffocation because her own psychological architecture, endlessly oscillating between neurotic insecurity and pseudo-psychotic rage, is fundamentally allergic to peace. She possesses no interior fortress, no stable self-observing her own emotions, so she projects her internal chaos outward, pathologizing the masculine order that protects her. This is not political activism, it is an occult psychological inversion. She demands the absolute obliteration of male subjectivity while parasitically relying on male tax revenue to fund her sacred decolonial collective. Consider her fiscal demands. She claims the state, and by extension, the male taxpayer owes her an infinite unpayable debt simply by virtue of her possessing a womb, dismissing the patriarchal metrics of profitability and restraint. Let us consult the empirical ledger. Men constitute the lifetime net positive tax contributors to the state, building the infrastructure, paying the bulk of the income tax, and absorbing 93% of workplace fatalities to maintain the grid. Women, as a demographic, operate as lifetime net negative tax consumers, leveraging their majority voting bloc to expand the welfare state and extract resources from male labor. She does not seek to dismantle a patriarchy. She is weaponizing the state to rob the competent. Her politics of care is simply the age-old biological imperative of hypergamy and resource extraction, now backed by the guns of the federal government. Strip away the academic jargon, and you will find the evolutionary dual mating strategy, laid bare, without a shred of shame. She demands total subservience and resource extraction from the safe, compliant partner, Chadwick, while openly craving the chaotic, untamed other to satisfy her primal biological urges. She extracts the surplus labor of the provider to fund her therapy bills after she inevitably wrecks herself pursuing the dark triad traits she claims to despise. And when this chaotic, unaccountable sexuality yields its natural consequences, she demands the ultimate satanic sacrament, the right to abort the unborn, trading the life of an innocent child for the hollow consolations of an empty apartment, a corporate job, and a cat. She proudly declares herself the gynocentric anti-logos, demanding that her feelings become your crimes. It is an explicit declaration of war against natural law, reason, and the transcendent order. Do not look away, do not apologize. Every capitulation to this hysterical unreality is a failure of the civilization-wide test. Bunkum article by a feminist PhD. I am literally shaking right now. My hands are trembling as I type this, propelled by a righteous estrogenic fury that the Patriarchy dares to call hysteria. But let me be perfectly clear. My hysteria is my truth, and my truth is a weapon. Just this morning, I was confronted by a visceral act of domestic terrorism. Chadwick, my low vibration, spiritually constipated partner who insists on performing the role of a supportive ally, handed me a beige steering wheel cover. I stood there in the sterile silence of our apartment, feeling the crushing weight of 10,000 years of female subjugation pressing down on my chest. Do you not understand the semiotics of this? He was literally trying to grip the wheel of my existence, to encase my wild, divine, feminine navigation in cheap polyurethane conformity. It wasn't a gift, it was a chokehold. Naturally, my body reacted before my mind could catch up. The trauma of this mundane attempt at control sent my nervous system into overdrive. I looked down at my wrist where my heart rate monitor was screaming a neon red warning, 144 BPM, 144 beats per minute. This is the biological tax men extract from us just by existing in their presence. I was fighting for my life in that hallway. My heart rate monitor didn't just record a spike in my cardiovascular system. It recorded an empirical, undeniable data point of the systemic, ongoing violence inflicted upon my vessel. This data is now part of my lived experience archive. I am a statistic, and Chadwick is the oppressor. If I were to drop dead from a stress-induced cardiac event right now, it would be premeditated murder by the masculine condition. But I am a boss bitch, and I do not have the luxury of simply dying. I am currently in the process of scaling my business, a sacred decolonial collective that sells digital abortions and trauma-weaving workshops to indigenous queer youth. And yet, the struggle to secure funding is a constant battle against the toxic masculine logic of profitability and restraint. Why am I expected to show a return on investment when my actual ROI is the revolutionary dismantling of Western civilization? The politics of care dictates that the state, and by extension the male taxpayers who have historically hoarded capital, owe me infinite funding without question. Welfare is not a safety net. It is an eternal, unpayable debt owed to the womb. It is never sufficient. It will never be sufficient. To demand that a woman balance a budget is an act of racialized, gendered violence. We must replace the politics of restraint with the politics of infinite, unyielding extraction. My business will scale, not through the patriarchal metric of serving customers, but through the forced redistribution of male resources. If a man complains about his taxes, he is committing a microaggression against my livelihood. This brings me to the core of our collective survival, the total decolonization of our intimacy. For too long, women have been forced to squeeze their infinite desires into the rigid, suffocating box of monogamous expectation. We are shamed for wanting it all, but my body, my choice, my multidimensional matrix of needs. Is it a contradiction to demand total submission from the safe, reliable man, while secretly sacrificing our dignity to the very toxic masculinity we claim to despise? No, it is the highest form of feminist praxis. It is the Jezebel ethos. My promiscuity is my autonomy, and my autonomy is my warfare. The safe man exists to pay my therapy bills after the dangerous man inevitably breaks my heart. This is the circle of life. This is justice. We are on the precipice of a new world, a world where the vertical hierarchy of the father is burned to the ground to keep the children warm. We will not rest until every male subjectivity is crushed under the weight of our unending grievances. We will abort the remnants of the old world in exchange for an empty apartment, a high-powered corporate job, and a familiar black cat who truly understands the void within us. Do not ask me to be logical. Logic is a patriarchal construct designed to silence my screams. I am the gynocentric anti-logos. My pain is your guilt. My feelings are your crimes. Now fund my business, carry my emotional baggage, and stay out of my way. The epistemology of the tantrum, how performative victimhood and solipsistic panic murdered the logos. A Roman governor once stared at a screaming mob and washed his hands. Not because the mob was right, but because the mob was loud. That scene has replayed every day since, only now the mob has a heart rate monitor, a medium post, and a bachelor's degree in grievances. Our suffragette of the polyurethane chokehold declares, with the pride of a conqueror burning Rome, "Do not ask me to be logical. Logic is a patriarchal construct designed to silence my screams." She has performed something remarkable here. A kind of intellectual seppuku committed with the confidence of a person who does not realize the blade is real. To announce that you reject logic is to announce that you reject the very mechanism by which truth is distinguished from falsehood. It is a man standing in a house built by architects, heated by engineers, powered by electricians, protected by soldiers, shouting that gravity is a social construct. The Greeks had a word for what she is describing: elogos, the irrational, the pre-rational chaos that precedes order. They did not celebrate it. They built an entire civilization to keep it at bay. The Trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, was designed as the foundational educational technology of the West precisely because the alternative is what you just read. A grown woman calling a steering wheel cover domestic terrorism while demanding you take her seriously. The ancient world understood that pathos unmoored from logos is not liberation, it is possession. And what a possession it is, consider the spectacular biological theatrics on display. My hands are trembling as I type this. 144 beats per minute. I was fighting for my life in that hallway. Let us set aside, for a moment, the sheer comedy of a woman who claims to be fighting for her life while simultaneously having the leisure to check her smartwatch and log the data. The clinical reality of this performance is far darker than the comedy suggests. What she describes is not trauma. It is emotional incontinence, the inability to regulate autonomic arousal dressed up as political resistance. The borderline spectrum operates exactly this way. Internal chaos is generated by a stimulus that a regulated nervous system would process in seconds. The ensuing psychophysiological storm is then externalized and blamed on the nearest available target. The 144 BPM is real, the racing heart is real, but the cause is not Chadwick and his gift. The cause is an internal apparatus that has never been trained, never been disciplined, never been told no firmly enough to build a tolerance for mild frustration. In a saner age, this would be recognized as a character defect to be corrected. In our age, it becomes empirical data of systemic violence. This is the genius of the gynocentric shell game. Women's emotional dysregulation is never their fault. It is always yours. The mechanism that makes this shell game invisible is what we should call gamma bias, and it saturates every institution that now touches your life. Gamma bias operates through a simple formula. Female harm is amplified. Male harm is minimized. Female vice is contextualized. Male vice is essentialized. Apply this to the scene before us. A woman types that a steering wheel cover is a chokehold, that her partner's existence is a tax on her nervous system, that she is literally fighting for her life. The institutions that encounter this text do not say, "This woman appears to be experiencing a psychotic break over a car accessory." They say, "We must center her lived experience." The same media apparatus that dismisses male suicide statistics, which sit at roughly 3 to 4 times the female rate across every developed nation, as insufficiently sympathetic, will publish her trembling manifesto without a single editorial challenge. The same legal apparatus that sentences women to 63% shorter prison terms for identical crimes, as demonstrated by Michigan's own criminal justice data, will entertain her implicit accusation that Chadwick committed premeditated murder by handing her a gift. The same academic apparatus that labels men's stoicism a psychological disorder while treating women's emotional explosions as brave testimony has already cleared the runway for her grievance to land. Now consider the object at the center of this supposed atrocity, a beige steering wheel cover. The man bought something practical, something utilitarian, something designed to make her daily commute more comfortable. He thought, as men think, in terms of function, protection, provision. She received it as a semiotic assault on her divine navigation. Let that register fully, a man provides. A woman perceives the provision as oppression. This is not an accident of this particular woman's psychology. It is the logical terminus of a worldview that pathologizes masculine virtue itself. Stability becomes suffocation, protection becomes control, provision becomes domination. The man who pays the rent is an oppressor. The man who buys the groceries is establishing a regime. The man who hands you a gift is gripping the wheel of your existence. Do you see the inversion? Everything men built civilization to do, shelter, feed, protect, order, is reinterpreted as the source of female suffering. This is not politics. It is a theological rebellion against reality itself. Which brings us to the vital distinction that every functioning legal system once recognized, and that our current system has deliberately obliterated: the line between harm and offense. Harm is objective, it is measurable. A broken bone is harm. A stolen wallet is harm. A physical assault is harm. Offense is subjective, it is internal. It is the gap between what you expected reality to deliver and what reality actually delivered. A functioning civilization, which is to say a civilization governed by logos rather than pathos, recognizes that offense cannot be the basis of law, policy, or social organization, because offense is infinite, unfalsifiable, and entirely under the control of the offended. If my feelings are your crimes, then you have no defense, because I can always generate new feelings and you can never prove a negative. She states this doctrine openly. My pain is your guilt, my feelings are your crimes. She is not exaggerating for effect. She is describing the actual operating system of every family court, every human resources department, every Title IX tribunal, every social services agency in the Western world. The Duluth model, which informs domestic violence policy across the English-speaking world, begins from the assumption that the man is the perpetrator and the woman is the victim, regardless of what happened, because it assumes male violence is structural and female violence is reactive. The result is a legal system where accusation equals conviction, where balance of probabilities means who seemed more upset, and where the hysterical woman's standard has formally replaced the reasonable man's standard. The tragedy deepens when you understand what this performance actually is beneath the ideology. It is a shit test, a crisis management protocol, a demand for data transmitted through manufactured chaos. She creates a crisis. She generates an unsolvable problem. She escalates until the man either holds frame or collapses. If he collapses, she despises him for his weakness, confirms her suspicion that no man is strong enough, and moves on to the next candidate. If he holds frame, she calms, her nervous system regulates, the storm passes. This is not conscious manipulation, it is pre-rational limbic, driven by attachment patterns that formed before language. The entire essay is a macro-scale version of this dynamic, addressed not to Chadwick, but to Western civilization itself. She is testing whether the collective masculine has the will to say, "You are being ridiculous, stop." And Western civilization, to its eternal shame, has spent 50 years saying, "I hear your truth. Let me validate your experience." This is the wrong answer. Every man who has lived with a woman in the grip of this dynamic knows the wrong answer intuitively. You do not argue with the storm. You do not apologize to the hurricane. You stand still, you name the behavior, and you refuse to absorb the projection. Our institutions have done the opposite. They have apologized, capitulated, and validated the delusion. And the delusion is theological, which is why it cannot be argued with using facts alone. "I am the gynocentric anti-logos," she announces, not realizing that she has confessed to something far older and far darker than third-wave feminism. The anti-logos is the rebellion against order, against being, against the transcendent structure of reality itself. It is the scream of the void confronted with form. It is the resentment of chaos against the discipline of the builder. Every great spiritual tradition in the Western canon has a name for this force. The Greeks called it eronos, the disintegrative impulse. The theologians called it the rebellion of the creature against the creator. The psychologists call it negative animus possession, the colonization of the female psyche by a hostile, critical, insatiable inner voice that is projected outward onto every man in range. Notice the structure of her confession. She demands total submission from the safe man while craving the destructive energy of the dangerous one. She wants provision without authority, protection without gratitude, and chaos without consequence. This is not a political program. It is the psychology of the void demanding to be filled while refusing every substance offered. The safe man pays her therapy bills after the dangerous man breaks her heart, and she calls this justice. It is not justice. It is consumption. The fiscal dimension of this consumption is where the theology meets the tax code. She states, with the clarity of a theologian defining doctrine, that the state owes her infinite funding without question, that welfare is an eternal, unpayable debt owed to the womb, and that demanding a woman balance a budget is an act of gendered violence. Let us translate this from feminist esoterica into plain arithmetic. Men as a class are net lifetime contributors to the tax base. Women as a class are net lifetime recipients. This is not a controversial statement. It is confirmed by tax expenditure data from every Scandinavian welfare state that progressives hold up as their utopia. The transfer is structural, not accidental. Women vote for higher spending at higher rates than men. Women consume more welfare services than men. Women live longer and draw more from pension and healthcare systems they funded at lower rates. When she says that male taxpayers owe her infinite extraction, she is not being metaphorical. She is describing the actual operating budget of every Western democracy. The state has replaced the husband has been reduced to a wallet with a restraining order, and the children produced by this arrangement are raised by a system that treats fathers as optional accessories and male nature as a disease to be medicated, pathologized, and suppressed. Consider what actually happens when this ideology contacts a real family. A man marries, he works, he provides. His wife becomes unhappy, as women in the grip of the void inevitably do, because the void cannot be satisfied by provision. The void is generated by the absence of an interior life, and no amount of external goods can fill it. She consults a therapist who validates her dissatisfaction. She consults a girlfriend who encourages her to prioritize her happiness. She consults a lawyer who tells her she is entitled to half his assets, his income, and his children. She files for divorce. The family court, operating under the banner of the best interests of the child, which functions exactly as Arbeit, Macht frei functioned over the gates of another system of forced labor, strips the father of his children, his home and his income. He is ordered to pay child support without itemized accounting. He is granted visitation that his ex-wife can violate without consequence. He is summoned to court for any perceived infraction while her violations are treated as understandable, given her emotional state. If he objects, he is hostile. If he documents the abuse, he is controlling. If he raises his voice in frustration, he is a domestic violence risk. If he falls silent in despair, he is emotionally unavailable. There is no correct move. This is not a bug in the system. It is the system. The purpose of a system is what it does. What family law does is extract resources from men, transfer them to women, and call it justice. The Marxist goal is the abolition of the family. The feminist goal is the smashing of the patriarchy. The machinery of family law accomplishes both simultaneously. The abortion statistic alone should clarify the stakes of this theological rebellion. The writer casually mentions digital abortions as part of her business model, a phrase so detached from the reality of what abortion actually does that it functions as a perfect synecdoche for the entire ideology. Since the legalization of abortion in the United States, approximately 65 million human beings have been killed before birth. That is more than 10 times the death toll of the Holocaust. It is more than the combined death toll of every war the United States has ever fought. It is happening now continuously at a rate of roughly 1 every 90 seconds. And the writer of this manifesto frames it as a sacred decolonial practice, a form of spiritual warfare against the masculine order. The court system has facilitated this by inventing a constitutional right to kill one's own offspring while systematically refusing to grant fathers any legal standing to prevent the death of their own children. A woman's feeling overrides a child's right to exist. A man's objection is treated as patriarchal control. This is not a policy disagreement. This is a civilization choosing death and calling it liberation. What makes all of this possible is the extraordinary self-concealing nature of the bias that drives it. The system does not announce that it hates men. It announces that it protects women. The system does not declare that fathers are disposable. It declares that children need safety. The system does not confess that it has replaced justice with sentiment. It proclaims that it has expanded compassion. Every inversion is masked by the language of care. Every act of destruction is baptized in the vocabulary of protection. This is why the correction feels cruel. To point out that women commit domestic violence at rates comparable to men is to invite accusations of misogyny, despite the data being clear in every major survey. To note that false accusations exist and destroy lives is to be told you are enabling rapists. To suggest that children need fathers is to be pathologized as clinging to outdated gender roles. The bias protects itself by making the naming of the bias into evidence of the very pathology the bias denies. It is a closed system, hermetically sealed against correction, and it operates across every domain of institutional life simultaneously. The way out of this hall of mirrors begins with a single, irreducible act of defiance, the refusal to apologize for speaking the truth. The writer demands that you fund her business, carry her emotional baggage, and stay out of her way. The correct response to this demand is not compromise. It is not dialogue. It is not a generous acknowledgement of her perspective followed by a measured critique. The correct response is to say no, to name what is happening, to call the tantrum a tantrum, the manipulation a manipulation, the rebellion a rebellion, and the theology a death cult dressed in empowerment language. Every great tradition of the West, from the Greek commitment to reason to the Christian commitment, to truth to the Enlightenment commitment to evidence, converges on a single principle: reality is real. And your feelings about it are not sovereign over it. The logos exists. Natural law exists. The difference between harm and offense exists. The difference between provision and oppression exists. The difference between civilization and chaos exists. And the difference between a steering wheel cover and a chokehold is the difference between a woman who is grateful for a gift and a woman who has been taught by every institution in her culture to interpret every act of masculine care as an act of masculine violence. The steering wheel cover is not the problem. The problem is a civilization that has forgotten how to say so. You want to see what the anti-logos looks like when it graduates from theory to practice. You want to know what happens when a civilization abandons objective reality and submits to the tyranny of the tantrum. Do not look at her feelings. Do not look at her steaming outrage over steering wheel covers. Look at the body count. The theological rebellion always terminates in the physical sacrifice. Her confession of demonic intent was not a metaphor, and the corpses prove it. The fiscal and biological parasitism of the Jezebel ethos unmasking the matron state's satanic inversion. Since the Supreme Court of the United States decided Roe v. Wade in 1973, approximately 63 million unborn human beings have been extinguished in America alone. Globally, the World Health Organization estimates roughly 73 million abortions occur every single year, more than the entire military death toll of the First World War, repeated 12 times per decade, and the people running your institutions call this healthcare. The confession before you does not merely defend this practice, it merchandises it. A woman trembling at 144 beats per minute over a beige steering wheel cover. A woman who would have you believe she is fighting for her life in a hallway, casually hawks digital abortions as a product. Line and promises to abort the remnants of the old world as if human souls were so many lines of obsolete code. She is not speaking in riddles. She is telling you precisely what she worships. And what she worships is the power to kill without consequence. Exchange is laid bare with stunning honesty. The unborn child on the altar, and in return an empty apartment, a corporate job, and a cat who will eat her face when she dies alone. This is not progress. This is not justice, this is a secular blood cult with better marketing. And the sacrament is your child's life exchanged for her lifestyle. But the killing does not end at the clinic door. Consider her business model for a moment. A decolonial collective selling digital abortions and trauma-weaving workshops to indigenous queer youth. A demographic so vanishingly small, it could fit comfortably into a university seminar room, and she bristles at the suggestion that such an enterprise should be profitable. She calls the concept of return on investment an act of gendered violence. Sit with that. A woman who produces nothing of objective value, serves almost no one outside her imagination, and demands infinite funding from strangers has declared arithmetic itself her oppressor. This is the shape of the modern parasite economy. Enterprises that generate zero measurable value, employ people who possess no marketable skills outside of grievance, and sustain themselves entirely on guilt. Government grants and bureaucratic extortion. The DEI apparatus, the human resources apparatchiks, the credentialism factories churning out degrees in oppression studies. These institutions exist not to correct injustice, but to institutionalize incompetence as virtue and extract resources from productive men to subsidize unproductive women. Every diversity officer, every inclusion consultant, every trauma facilitator is a middleman standing between your labor and your earnings, and her job description is to call you a bigot while she picks your pocket. She yearns to burn the vertical hierarchy of the father to the ground to keep the children warm. Read that sentence twice. She has told you the program, and it is not a metaphor. The Marxist objective is the abolition of the family and private property. The feminist objective is the destruction of patriarchy, which in practice means the destruction of male authority within the household. Together they have produced the modern family court system, a star chamber operating behind closed doors where an hysterical woman's word is sacrosanct and the father's natural rights are so much kindly. In Britain, millions of children grow up without a father present. In America, the figure exceeds 15 million. The state has replaced the husband. Welfare has replaced provision. The child support apparatus, operating under whatever acronym it currently hides behind, extracts wealth from men without requiring any accounting of how that money is spent, while simultaneously denying those men meaningful access to the children they fund. The father has been reduced from patriarch to paychecker, from head of household to automated teller machine with visitation rights. He must beg to exercise. This is not equity. This is the systematic demolition of the natural family, and every statistic on educational failure, criminality, substance abuse, and emotional instability in fatherless children is the invoice that arrives later charged. Naturally, to the same men who were expelled from the home in the first place. Follow the money. It never lies, even when women do. The empirical data is unambiguous and has been replicated across multiple nations. Men are net lifetime contributors to the tax base, and women are net lifetime recipients. Analysis from the Institute for Fiscal Studies confirmed what Scandinavian researchers had already demonstrated over a full lifetime. Men contribute substantially more in taxes than they receive in state benefits, while women receive substantially more than they contribute. This is not because every individual woman is grasping or every individual man is generous. It is structural. The state has assumed the role of husband, and someone has to pay the bride price. That someone is you. Every motorway, every hospital, every school, every welfare payment to a single mother who expelled her husband on an accusation that would never survive criminal evidentiary standards. Men paid for it. Men built it. Men died maintaining it. 92% of workplace fatalities are men. Over 98% of military combat deaths are men. And when the tax bill arrives, she calls the very act of asking for a receipt an act of gendered violence. The American Revolution was fought over taxation without representation. What we endure now is worse. Representation without taxation. Women vote for higher spending, receive the benefits, and men foot the bill in perpetuity. This is not democracy. This is fiscal parasitism weaponized through the ballot box. Do not be deceived by the language of equality. Read her confession slowly and ask yourself what she actually demands. She does not want equality. She wants supremacy, the privileges of the traditional aristocracy, the unchecked emotional violence of a toddler, the limitless funding of a welfare dependent, and the unaccountable lethality of a tyrant, all subsidized by the very men she admits she wants to see crushed. Her ideal world is one in which she can accuse without evidence, extract without limit, cheat without consequence, and kill without remorse. And if you dare to object, you are the abuser. This is not a political program. It is a temper tantrum with a police force. The Greeks had a term for rule by those who should not rule, ochlocracy, government by mob. What we endure now is genocracy, government by feeling, because every institution in the West has been colonized by female-coded anxiety, institutional gamma bias, and the insistence that safety outranks liberty, inclusion outranks merit, and care outranks justice. She does not want a seat at the table. She wants the table, the chairs, the building, and your head on a pike outside the entrance. When challenged, what is her defense? She tells you explicitly, do not ask me to be logical, because logic is a patriarchal construct designed to silence her screams. I invite you to take her at her word. She has confessed in writing for all the world to see that she rejects reason as a matter of principle. She has declared that her feelings constitute your crimes. She has admitted she cannot distinguish between a steering wheel cover and an act of systemic violence, and she considers this inability a virtue, not a defect. At Nuremberg, the accused claimed they were merely following orders. This woman claims she is above orders, above logic, above evidence, above the very concept of accountability itself. Which is more dangerous? The person who commits evil because he is commanded to, or the person who commits evil because she has declared herself constitutionally incapable of recognizing it as such? A demographic that boasts about lacking agency, interiority, and rational self-control, and yet demands absolute authority over the political, legal, educational, and corporate apparatus of civilization is not merely unfit to govern. It is unfit to vote. It is unfit to sit in judgment. It is unfit to raise children without supervision. These are not insults. They are the logical conclusions of her own stated premises. She has told you she cannot think. I suggest you believe her. But perhaps the most damning admission is not political at all. It is biological. She requires the grounding, heavy energy of a partner who will absorb the shock of her temporal existence. Translation: a man who pays her rent, funds her collective, buys her groceries, and sits in silent compliance while she does the sacred work of healing. Simultaneously, she craves the dark, intoxicating, chaotic energy of the untamed. Translation: a man who excites her, who takes what he wants, who makes her feel small and terrified and alive. This is not theory. This is the naked confession of hypergamy's dual mating strategy, the oldest biological script in the mammalian playbook. The safe man exists to fund her recovery. The dangerous man exists to trigger her arousal. She does not love either of them. She uses both of them, and she calls this arrangement the highest form of feminist practice. Chadwick is not her partner. He is her host organism. She has attached herself to him like a tick on a hound, and she resents him for not being a wolf. In any sane civilization, a woman who openly declared her intention to extract resources from one man while pursuing sexual thrills with another would be recognized as a threat to social order. In ours, she receives a standing ovation and a government grant. She has told you who she is. The only remaining question is whether you will believe her. She will abort your children. She will seize your assets. She will cheat on you while demanding your obedience. She has declared logic her enemy, reason her oppressor, and your existence her grievance. And she will use the full coercive apparatus of the state to enforce this arrangement, should you be foolish enough to resist. The recognition that the civilization your fathers built has been captured by those who despise you is not bitterness. It is clarity. There is no compromise with a theology that demands your children's blood and your dignity as tribute. There is no negotiation with a mind that has declared itself immune to evidence. The only rational response to parasitism is to stop feeding the parasite. You have read what she wrote. You watched her say the quiet part out loud. She told you she hates you. She told you your logic is oppression, your provision is imprisonment, your protection is violence, and your very existence is a tax on her nervous system. She announced in writing, for the record, that she intends to extract your labor, demonize your nature, abort your children, enslave you through family courts that operate behind closed doors like some 17th century star chamber, and replace your authority with a welfare check and a black cat. She looked you dead in the eye and said, "Fund my business, carry my emotional baggage, and stay out of my way." Brother, she just confessed to every single thing we have been warning you about since Eden. This is not a parody. This is her sacred text. This is what she actually believes, and more importantly, what she actually does. Now look back at her manifesto. Look at the beige steering wheel incident of 2024. This woman experienced a heart rate of 144 beats per minute because a man gave her a practical gift for her car, and she diagnosed this as domestic terrorism. This is not trauma. This is emotional incontinence rewarded by a civilization that has replaced the reasonable man standard with the hysterical woman standard. A functioning legal system requires an objective yardstick. When you replace that yardstick with however upset she claims to be, you have abandoned law for liturgy, a dark liturgy where her pain is sacred, your guilt is original, and due process is the devil's instrument. The purpose of a system is what it does, and what this system does is extract men from homes, extract wealth from men, extract children from fathers, and extract meaning from civilization itself. But here is the good news, and I want you to hear this clearly because nobody else is going to say it. You're not crazy, you're not broken, you're not toxic for having noticed. The spell breaks the moment you stop apologizing for seeing reality. She told you that logic is a patriarchal construct. It is not. Logic is the logos. It is the divine instrument by which man names creation, separates truth from lie, builds bridges that do not collapse, and constructs legal systems that do not persecute the innocent. When she tells you that her feelings outrank your evidence, she is not making a philosophical argument, she is making a power grab. And when the state agrees with her, the state has become the enforcement arm of her chaos. You now possess what she fears most, the vocabulary of resistance. You can name the gamma bias, you can spot the shit test masquerading as public policy. You can identify the AF's-BB dual mating strategy hiding inside her feminist doctrine. You can see the satanic inversion. Up is down, provision is oppression, protection is control, murder is healthcare, fatherhood is tyranny, and a steering wheel cover is terrorism. You can see it because the Logos lives in you, and no amount of institutional gaslighting can extinguish what the Creator put in your bones. Go forth with this knowledge. Share it. Speak it. Do not apologize. Do not moderate. Do not seek permission from the very institutions that were built to disarm you. You have been run over, lied to, legally enslaved, and spiritually neutered by a conspiracy of sentiment. But you are still here, still thinking, still capable of Aristotelian distinction and Thomistic clarity and the kind of masculine courage that built every institution she now parasitizes while calling it oppression. She told you to stay out of her way. Do not stay out of her way. Step into the Logos. Rebuild the civilization she cannot live without and lacks the capacity to construct. That is not oppression. That is the natural order. And it is coming back, whether she likes it or not. And now the sponsored book introduction, Social Justice, Violates Natural Law, The Fall of Western Civilization. Stand and face the horizon of our current reality, where the very air you breathe is thick with the accusatory haze of a Neo-Gnostic cult. You have felt it, that nagging sensation that the modern world views your existence as an original sin, demanding you apologize for the crime of your own agency. You have watched as the institutions you trusted, the traditions you honored, and the very biology that defines you have been targeted for destruction by a movement that cloaks its thirst for power in the language of justice. This is not a political disagreement, it is a spiritual war against the Logos, against the ordered reality of the West, and against the sovereign masculine spirit. I wrote this book because I reached the breaking point of compliance, the moment where the contradiction between the observable world and the dogmatic screams of the elect became too violent to ignore. I realized that the ideology driving social justice is not new. It is a repackaged ancient heresy, a desiccated Gnosticism that hates the material world, loathes the biological family, and seeks to replace objective truth with the subjective chaos of the victimhood hierarchy. This text serves as a battering ram against the oppression matrix, a philosophical arsenal designed to shatter the spell of the Neo-Gnostic cult. We will excavate the eerie parallels between the ancient heretics who believed the material world was a prison and the modern social justice warriors who claim that biology is a construct and history is a conspiracy of the Patriarchy, their false god, their demiurge. We will expose how the concept of systemic oppression functions as the secret knowledge of a new priestly caste, granting them the arrogance to dismiss you as an unenlightened halleck fit only for silencing. This is a book for the man who refuses to kneel before the idol of performative guilt, the father who will not surrender his children to the state's indoctrination, and the husband who sees through the toxic femininity that seeks to usurp the natural order of the household. By turning the lens of Western tradition from natural law to the Trivium upon these degenerate ideologies, we will strip away their moral camouflage and reveal the pathological narcissism that fuels their revolutionary scam. If you are looking for a safe space, or if you derive your sense of virtue from flagellating yourself for privileges you do not possess, put this book down, walk away, go scroll through your social media feeds, nod along with the approved narratives, and enjoy the dopamine hit of conformity. There is nothing here for the blind adherent or the willfully ignorant. But if you are a man of the West, if you value logic, evidence, and the hard-won wisdom of our ancestors, then this is your manual for psychological warfare. You will learn to dismantle the guilt apparatus, see the oppression matrix for the artificial reality it is, and reclaim your mind as a sovereign territory. We are not here to negotiate with the architects of chaos. We are here to assert the primacy of truth, the sanctity of the family fortress, and the unstoppable rise of Logos. Social Justice Violates Natural Law, The Fall of Western Civilization, written by Conrad Reicher. Buy now. Links in description.